I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast, part of the 90 Min Football Network. Back for another edition of the Canton and Symeou show. That means joining me is the brilliant, the one and only Mr. Tom Canton from the Gooner Talk TV and Football.London. Tom, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good, man. Good. I love the fact you introduced me that way because it means I know that you're stepping me up for next week. So I've now got to interview you in some kind of brilliant fashion. So that's good.
There's always a plan, you know. There's always an ulterior motive. No, I'm just kidding. Good to see you, man. I don't think we did one of these last week, did we? We didn't get around to it.
No, we did. We did. I think we did a show with Dan and Soph.
That's right. You are correct. We try and do these as much as we possibly can, but obviously sometimes work just gets in the way. And that's just the way it is. But next week's edition, or the next edition, whenever we get to do it, hopefully next week, will be on Tom's Gooner Talk TV channel. Now, the link is in the title and in the description. So if you could kindly click on it and go over and subscribe there if you haven't done so already. I know a lot of you are subscribed across both channels, but if you're not on the Gooner Talk TV, then make sure you do get over there and check it out because there is fantastic content. And Tom gets up every day and puts on a show for you guys at 8 a.m. I'm always in awe of that because, as I always say, I don't think I could do it. So fair play to you. Hats off. Tom, look, let's get into it, mate, because there's a lot to discuss as always. Let's start with the Raphinha stuff. I thought that my day was done yesterday. I went in the house, I put my feet up. I even thought about tuning into Love Island. I poured myself a drink and bang, David Ornstein comes out with a tweet and a piece talking about Raphinha. And I thought, better get back down to the man cave and put out a little video. Now, it was just a video, so our audio listeners won't have seen that. But I did talk briefly about that situation. Obviously, Arsenal lodged a bid for Raphinha that was said to be well below what Leeds are looking for. Leeds have since rejected that bid, as we're told today. Talk to me a little bit about how you're feeling about this situation overall. Has it come as a surprise to you that Arsenal have actually gone that far? What do you think is a fair price for Raphinha? There's so much we can kind of unpick from this.
Yeah, I am a bit surprised, to be honest. Like, Arsenal are going to go for a wide forward, but, with the links to Cody Gakpo and players like this, I thought that would be the more sensible Arsenal style move, not going for, one of the top Premier League options in that position. And he is one of the top Premier League options in that position. So I think that that's kind of evidence, and with how much Arsenal are clearly pushing to try and get this deal done, and the intention that they've got it shows again the method behind this window and what we want to see from this Arsenal team and this Arsenal board and recruitment group is a real ambition in the market. And I think a move for Raphinha is definitely evidence of that. I think he's a player that would add so much quality to what we've already got. I think immediately you think, well, what's going to happen to Bukayo Saka? But we know Saka's versatile enough, can play in different positions. But also, I've talked heavily about the idea that we shouldn't be replacing players. We should be strengthening the team. We should be bringing in competitors for each role. And Raphinha definitely does bring that.
What do you think is a fair price then? Because we have no idea, really. Well, I don't anyway. I don't know if you know anymore what the actual offer was. All we know, it was well below what Leeds are looking for. What do you think is a fair price for Raphinha? Because as much as I like the player, and I've talked about him before, I remember I did a show a little while ago with Mike where we kind of looked at what we would do in the transfer window, and he was one of the players on my list. But I do have like a limit with Raphinha in terms of the price I'd be willing to pay. Do you have a limit? And what do you think is a fair price in order to part with to get this guy in the door?
I always worry about putting limits on things because ultimately, I don't know how much would have to be paid to then affect what else we need to do in the market, if that makes sense. Like if you spend, say, 70, 80 million on Raphinha, does that mean you can't get, say, Lissandro Martinez? In which case, I think he's such an important target for us, Martinez, that I wouldn't sacrifice him for Raphinha if you could get, say, a Gakpo or a Diaby for something cheaper than that. I think the bid was around 30 million from the sounds of things. So I'm not surprised that was rejected because that was the price that basically Barca were willing to go to. It came across as a bit of a bid as Arsenal testing the waters and being like, well, is he actually keen about moving, and would he move if we put in the same price kind of Barca went in for it? It's a bit strange. I had a lot of people in my chat box this morning kind of asking why would we put in a bid that's well below, the asking price. And I have some sympathy for the people that are frustrated by that as well, because we've been burned so many times in the past by doing
PTSD.
40 plus one, and stuff like that. So as lead a Gooner in there just saying 30 plus one in the chat box it's part and parcel of Arsenal history in the transfer market. So I can understand the frustration. In terms of how high I would go, it's difficult. I think I wouldn't go over £60 million for Raphinha, but I would pay 50 for him. I think that's what the going rate of a starting, trending Premier League goal scoring wide forward is right now. And I'm absolutely fine with going to that 50 million. If that's 45 plus add-ons, as Harvey says in the chat, then yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think I'm around about the same. I'm around about the £50 million mark. I'd probably stretch to 55 as well, if that was what was necessary to get the deal over the line. Because I do think he's a good player, and I do think he's someone that would add a lot to the squad. You're also talking about someone who's, we've tended to go for in recent windows players of a younger age and players that are still sort of developing. And I'm not saying Raphinha is old. I think he's 25, but he's still got room to grow, but he's also at a very good and solid level now, which is something I'm keen for us to add. The outputs are there, even in a weak Leeds United side. And you'd hope that at a club like Arsenal, he could thrive and go on to that next level. I think going back to that point, though, about the bid and about people sort of being worried and frustrated by the fact that we've seemingly got nowhere near hitting the mark as far as Leeds are concerned, it does go back to a bit of sort of transfer PTSD, if you like, doesn't it, as an Arsenal fan base, because of some of the things that we've seen happen in the past. But it is common for clubs to go in and lowball first up. It's kind of, I said this on my short video last night. If this was any other club, we'd probably look at this and go, well, that's just normal procedure. But because it's Arsenal and because of what's happened in the past, there is a worry and a concern. But what it does is it sends a message to Raphinha, doesn't it? That, we're dead serious. Are you? And it kind of encourages Raphinha's people to start pushing from their side as well, if this is a move that they want to make. And I think that can only be a good thing. Hopefully we can bridge that gap. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but last summer we bid for Ben White a number of times before we got a deal done, didn't we?
Yeah, we lowballed £40 million, I think, to start off with, maybe lower than that. Brighton were always like, it's 50 million or nothing. You ain't getting him. They don't need to sell. They didn't have to sell, which is different, I think, with the Leeds situation. I think Leeds would have more pressure to sell on them because there's reports coming out that, that they don't really want to stand in his way of moving. If he wants to move, they feel of what he's given them, helping them stay up in the Premier League. He's kind of earned a way to move. So when Brighton turned around and said 50 and we were like 40, no, 45, no, okay, 50 and we'll pay it. And we got it in. And, Ben White was an investment and had a really good season last season. So I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes.
What do you make of the interest in Raphinha rumoured from some of the other clubs? Because obviously people talk about Barcelona being his preference, but we know that Barcelona financially right now anyway, unless they sort of restructure things or move players on, cannot afford what Leeds' asking price is. We've heard that Chelsea have explored the possibility. We're hearing that Tottenham could be interested and have notified, according to Fabrizio Romano, have notified Leeds of their intention to make a bid. How concerned are you by this competition?
Yeah, naturally concerned. Arsenal are in a weak position not being in the Champions League. And if Chelsea decide they want to move for the player, if I take my Arsenal hat off, Chelsea is the obvious choice between the two teams. You get Champions League football, you've got a team that have got ambitions of trying to win a title well ahead of Arsenal. So I absolutely think it's a concern. Arsenal are being aggressive in the market this summer because they know they don't have that kind of riding for them this summer. They hope they might have done with how the season finished last year, but they didn't. And now we're in a position where they need to be aggressive. They've gone out and got some early signings. Hopefully that's done with the mindset of going and saying, look what we're doing. We're being aggressive in the market. We're going and bringing in more players. We've got ambitions to try and push towards higher goals. That's why you should, sign on to the Arsenal project, if you will. But Spurs doesn't necessarily worry me. The worrying factor about Spurs is always going to be Antonio Conte and the pool that he's got. But, the players they're being linked to, the main players like Richarlison, Jed Spence, they've already signed Perisic. They've already obviously got Basuma as well. They're not players that necessarily really worry me. Jed Spence doesn't worry me. Perisic doesn't, and Richarlison certainly doesn't either. I thought they would push for higher signings. That's not to say those guys, aren't decent footballers, and Basuma is a very good footballer. And I think that when it comes to what we're trying to do in the market, and you consider Gabriel Jesus, Raphinha, Fabio Vieira, one of the most exciting Portuguese talents that's come out of Porto. When I spoke to people based there, they're mad that he's gone. Absolutely mad that he's gone, and think Arsenal have got a real steal at £34 million for someone like him. Lisandro Martinez, you look at his stats. We did a tactical breakdown on him yesterday. He shines. Like, he absolutely outstrikes Gabriel in so many areas, even aerially, despite being quite short. So if we can get those types of players in, and I'm looking at the competition, I think that should be a sign to any potential targets that look Arsenal being very serious this summer.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I agree with you. I'm not overly concerned about Spurs. I think that, as I've been saying over the last few weeks, like, look, Spurs have done some good business so far. There's no denying that. Some of the players they brought in, I do think, will add positives to their team and to their squad. But I do feel like at Spurs, given Antonio Conte's sort of tendency to not stick around at places, it is all being built on a very on an unstable structure. It's kind of being built on the premise of this guy staying and taking him to a level that I'm not sure he's going to stick around long enough to do. So I think Arsenal would be the more appealing option. Champions League football is obviously a thing, but do you take 1 year's Champions League football in exchange for what could potentially be sustainable success moving forward on a project that you perhaps believe in a little bit more? So I don't really worry about them. Chelsea as well, I'm not too sure that they're massively keen on this. Like, I know the report says that, Raphinha's preference would be Barcelona and then Chelsea, but you can only pick a preference from what is a viable option, right? Like, I've used this analogy 1,000,001 times, but I'm going to use it again. I'd love to go out with Jennifer Lopez over most people, but it ain't going to happen. It's not possible. So there's no point in it being my preference.
Back here.
You know what I mean? You know what, Tom? I'll tell you what, if I have a little shave and a haircut, maybe, but no, and lose a few stone as well. But no, just kidding. But the point I'm trying to make here is that there's no point in sort of obsessing over something that isn't even a possibility. And I don't really feel at this stage that Chelsea is a realistic one, and Barcelona, unless they get their act together, isn't going to be his next destination either. David Ornstein said today that it's going to be it could be a long and difficult process based on the competition. I'm almost in this place now in the transfer window where great, we're looking to do business, and a week or two ago it looked like we were very quiet and people were starting to get concerned and worried. But with that then comes almost a clamor to see Arsenal do things quickly, and we kind of got to temper our expectations as to the fact that this can take a while with its numerous deals, right? How are you handling that? Because I'm struggling.
Yeah, I mean, when you do a show every day, as we do, it's tough. The morning shows have now got a Gabriel Jesus daily update effectively at this point, because even though there's not loads happening, with that, because it's a case of, it's to my understanding, it's like this close to happening. We could see an announcement of an agreement this week. It's that close. I think that we want to see updates every day. And also when you see like what we've seen the last week, that only makes things worse, because, Arsenal are now being linked with 4 or 5 players in the space of a week. We haven't seen this amount of activity at the start of a window for a long time, if ever. So then there becomes greater expectations every day for more news to drop. Or, when we sign Fabio Vieira out of absolutely nowhere, or we do the deals for Callum Chambers that went to Villa for nothing. Matt Ryan came out of nowhere. Austin Trusty came out of nowhere. And that's because Arsenal are implementing a strategy. I wrote a piece on this yesterday, revealing that. And it's working, and we can expect that to happen more. But there's still always going to be a frustration that something doesn't drop big every day, and we're obviously refreshing our Twitter feeds and following all the same people, hoping that they're going to reveal something or they would have found something online. But it's never going to be realistic to expect all of our business to be done before pre-season. I'm just hoping that the priority deals are.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again. And I've spoken to friends over the last few days, and kind of the general consensus is, let's get it done before preseason. But as you say, it's not realistic to expect all of the business to be done by that point. I think that later on in the window, you tend to see a bit more movement because people become desperate to sell, desperate to sign. So they then are willing to compromise a little bit more in order to get things over the line. Plus other movement takes place, which can then potentially facilitate other deals. There's so much still to happen in this transfer window, and we've got to be patient, as you say. And to a degree, trust in the process. And talking about trusting in the process, I know people cringe when I say that, which is why I love throwing it out there. EDU sat down and gave an interview, which was released shortly after the Fabio Vieira announcement. What did you make of that? I don't want to go through it word for word because people will have seen it and read the quotes from it. But what was your kind of takeaway from that?
He looks optimistic, as you would expect, about business being done. I like the fact that even though the interview was about signing Fabio Vieira, that they weren't afraid to talk about signings. If they weren't confident of getting business done, it would have been, what are your thoughts on Fabio Vieira? What does it say about the club? Where's he going to fit into the team? All the, the specific stuff. And then they just didn't talk about the possibility of, upcoming weeks. I feel that's a good sign, an optimistic and positive sign. Yes, Arsenal, as Sophie will tell us, are brilliant at PR. We know that. But I think it is worth being optimistic about. I like the way that he spoke. Edu gets a lot of bad rap. I think there's a lot of hyperbole around him in a negative way. I think that he's been part of what Mikel Arteta has tried to do and change at the club in terms of recruitment, that you consider like the billion that we've spent on transfers and how much since, say, 2007 when the Chronicles come in has been spent well. It's not a lot. I use the example that I can count on my hands, the number of good players that we've brought. I say good, but I mean progressive players, players that are going to which aim to take the club somewhere when they came in. And yet, when you look at what's happened in the last 2 summer windows and now moving into these summer windows and the third one under Arteta, you can we're going over into double figures, hopefully this summer, in terms of players that have been signed to progress this team forwards. And also seeing like someone like William Saliba come back, Edu and Mikel would have been part of that. Edu, as we know, went out and watched him in France. They would have had to convince him that this is still the right place for him. Edu is going to be part of that as well. Yes, they made mistakes with Saliba in the past, but I don't care about those mistakes if we get it right now when it matters. And it looks like that we might. So, yeah, I think that he gets a lot of undue criticism, but we will rightly criticise him come the end of the window if we've not got the business done that we need to. It looks all happy-clappy now because we're being linked with Raphinha and Gabriel Jesus and Sandra Martinez, but if we don't get that business done, then quite rightly, then we'll turn around. We're all speaking hypothetically at this point, it means next to nothing in the end goal if you haven't followed through on those hypotheticals.
There's also a good chance, isn't there, that we go out and bring in players that were on nobody's radar as well, as alternatives to some of the big names that we're being linked with. I mean, you cast your mind back to a few days ago, Youri Tielemans was, in some people's opinion, a done deal. That one was going to happen by the end of June, we were told. And now it looks like that is sort of falling away in terms of its likelihood. And then out of nowhere, Fabio Vieira comes out of the sort of woodwork, and he's here and he's signed for the Arsenal. So we've got to kind of prepare ourselves as fans for the fact that we might be working on something that we just don't know anything about. And it's almost dangerous, isn't it, to get too invested in players that aren't your players at this stage and almost shut yourself off to other possibilities.
Yeah, I think we may see that, with the Youri Tielemans situation, because that looks near dead at this point. It's a case, I know that David Ornstein said it's like one of those where Arsenal may have a feeling that if he's open and he isn't getting that much interest, that they may be able to go back in for him later on. But right now, it just doesn't look like a realistic deal for Arsenal, I think. And you've seen, a report about Fabian Ruiz come out recently as well. I think Arsenal will be looking at alternatives. It's not just Edu and Arteta and Richard Garlick. There is a massive team of analysts and scouts behind the scenes. They've recruited a lot of really high up scouts from other clubs like Bayern Munich. There's one that's coming from France, one in from Spain. There's one based domestically in the UK as well that's come in the last kind of 18 months. So they've really pushed to improve the recruitment squad. And I think that when we obsess over a player like Tielemans and it doesn't happen, we're obviously left very disappointed. We've seen that in the past. I've done it. I've done it with players like Dominic Szoboszlai, for instance, that became like a meme on the channel. Marco Asensio being another one as well. Ironically, we've been linked with again this summer. So you can't obsess around it. Patrick Schick was another one from this summer. I really wanted to see us go for someone like that at striker. He's now signed a contract at by Leverkusen. I was tweeted by about 1 million people saying that he'd signed a new deal. So you can't get too... Buendia's another one, says Nas in the chat. Yeah, like Buendia last summer was a massive one at the beginning of the window.
Symeou,
yeah,
one.
Absolutely.
So many.
and I think that Martin Ødegaard turned out way better than what we could have hoped for with Buendia at Villa. And I'm happy that we got Ødegaard over Buendia. So in the end... Look, at the end of the day, I'm glad that we've moved the way we have, and I'm hoping that I have faith that they will choose the right targets and get the right targets in this summer.
Fingers crossed, mate. Fingers crossed. Before we continue through the show, and I'm going to ask you guys to start popping some questions in the live chat box. Put a little Q at the beginning. Makes it easier for us to pick them out. But I just want to remind you guys that if you haven't done so already, make sure, first of all, you head over to the Gooner Talk TV. You can click on the link via the title in this video, or there is one in the description as well. Give Tom's channel a subscribe. There's brilliant daily Arsenal content on there. You don't want to miss it, particularly during the transfer window where he keeps you across everything bright and early every morning. What more could you want? Also, though, please do hit that like button, because there are over 740 of you with us live on YouTube alone right now, but we've only got 121 likes on the board. That is not good enough. Let's set an initial target, come on, of 300 likes. Let's get there ASAP, and then maybe we can move a little bit higher in our ambitions there. Just wanted to highlight a couple of comments before we go over to the questions. Big thank you to the Fort Lauderdale Gooner Craig for his kind super chat. He says, Harry, you could totally pull J-Lo. I know. I was just being modest.
I love that he leaves me out of that, just because Tom would have no chance.
Leader Gooner says Jennifer Symeou. Doesn't sound too bad, I guess. I don't know. Doesn't really have a ring to it, does it? No. And Rob Segal says, and it makes an interesting point. And I wanted to ask you about this, Tom, which is why I highlighted this comment. He says he listened to Tim Vickery on TalkSport this morning, and he seriously questions whether we are Rafinha's first choice. Also, he's concerned that Jesus prefers playing wide right. So let's tackle that in two parts. The bit about Rafinha's first choice, we kind of talked about it already, but isn't there an argument that you might not always be someone's first choice when going into a negotiation, and part of your job is to persuade them that this is the place?
Yeah, if you only sign players that you were the first choice of that player, you're going to come out of a window worse off than you went into it. It's just not realistic, especially where Arsenal are right now as a club. There are going to be a lot of other clubs that are preferred destinations over us. It's about that's where the challenge comes, and that's where the real praise will come if we get someone like Raphinha, as we were able to get him in despite us not being his initial preference, and that we push through for a deal for someone like that despite those barriers being there. So I think that is worthy of even more praise when you pull off deals like that. When it comes to the second part of the question about Gabriel Jesus, I thought it was a really interesting kind of breakdown from Tim Vickery on Sky when he did it. I think he said he spoke to the Brazilian coach about it, and Gabriel said he prefers to play, in a wider position. I'm not going to sit here and go against what Tim said and say that, that's not true. What I do think is I think that Gabriel may relish the challenge of playing at the number 9 position if he was at a different club, and told this is going to be you for the future. You're going to be the Arsenal's number 9. I think he would see that as an opportunity to maybe refurbish his career, rebrand himself a little bit, specialise in that striker role. But Arteta in particular loves versatile players. He loves players that can play in multiple roles, that can cover different positions. So Jesus brings him that. But yeah, it doesn't concern me that, he prefers playing in a wide area, because I think people are overlooking the Eddie Nketiah situation a bit. I think people maybe are underestimating how many games he might play for us at striker next season. And I know that that's not going to please the Dan Pottses of this world, as we know from our WhatsApp group. But if he does put in the goals and the form that we saw at the end of last season, he will end the season next year with numbers that if we signed a player that puts in those type of numbers, we'd be delighted. So we have to be, I'm open to the idea of seeing what's capable next year.
My opinion on the whole Gabriel Jesus through the middle thing is that actually Gabriel Jesus does want to play through the middle. I think that when he first came through, that's what he was, right? When he first joined Manchester City, he was being put across as Sergio Aguero's replacement. That's what he was kind of marketed as, right? He was coming in to eventually take on what Sergio Aguero had been doing for all those years. And I think actually what may have happened, and again, Tim Vickery knows better than me, but this is just my opinion, is that he may have lost a bit of confidence because of the fact that he was in and out of the side, because of the fact that at times people were critical of his performances. And that can make you almost fearful of playing as a centre forward, particularly in an environment like Brazil, where there is so much pressure to win all the time. And maybe he felt that he could impact the game without as much pressure and without as much reliance being placed upon him to deliver the goals for that side if he was playing from the right-hand side. I don't think Mikel Arteta would have moved for this player without knowing that he could fit in the role that he wants him to fit. We know they have a relationship. We know that that relationship is probably going to be key in trying to get him across here. And I think that Mikel Arteta, having worked with him day to day on the training ground, will know all about his attributes, will know all about where his head's at, and will be, if not certain that he wants to play there now, will be certain he can convince him to play there. And as you say, it might not always be that rigid. It might sometimes be Eddie Nketiah up front with Jesus from one of the flanks. You might sometimes see Arsenal play with false nine. I think that the kind of big key point to take away from what we've read and understood of this window so far is that, as you say, versatility is right at the top of the wish list. That is key to Mikel Arteta. And Gabriel Jesus offers you that centre forward option, but also gives you that ability to switch things around as well. So I'm not massively and overly concerned about that, I've got to be honest. But, every signing, Tom, has a degree of risk to it, doesn't it? And you just kind of have to accept that.
Yeah, of course it does. There's never going to be a guarantee. Erling Haaland is not guaranteed to succeed. I mean, some players will have a smaller, assumed degree of risk because of who they are. But I mean, you look at Lionel Messi go to PSG. That's arguably in his prime the best player in the world, still very, very good. In the season that he left Barca, go into what was perceived to be a league that you would think that he may be able to thrive in more than La Liga, and it didn't happen. Sure, got a lot of assists, but wasn't able to impact games maybe as much as people expected. It's happened loads and loads of times with players that have made a move and it's not worked. I mean, when Shevchenko went to Chelsea, stuff like this, it's just not worked out at times. So there's always going to be a risk, but Arsenal, as I think we've seen through their recent deals, do a lot of assessments, and they do a lot of scouting, a lot of analysis on players, checking with, people around them. They go beyond just what's going on the football pitch. They go into their kind of personal life. They go into what are they like as a person, what's their attitude, their personality. I mean, that's why quickly I think people discussed Raphinha's kind of personalities, attitude issues. I don't think he's got attitude issues at all. I think you speak to Leeds fans, they think his attitude is brilliant, the way he applies himself on the pitch. And Jesus is the same. I think Jesus had a poor World Cup, as Tim talked about, and has recovered from that, all the while being linked with a move away from Man City, was starting to bang in goals for Man City at the end of last season. It shows that mentality of him. So, yeah, there's always going to be a risk, but that can't be a reason to not go for a player.
You can talk yourself out of anyone if you really want to. Let's take some of the questions then. JW says, you say Jesus, the winger, would relish playing at centre forward. What about Pépé? We know he can score. Numbers, when given a chance, are better than Jesus's. But hey, I just think that the Nicolas Pépé story at Arsenal is done. I mean, I think he's talented. I think there's a good chance he goes somewhere else and rediscovers the form that he showed in previous years. I think he's unpredictable. I think he gives you a lot of what you need in the final third. But it's just not. This is just not going anywhere, is it, Tom?
No. The way I describe Pépé is I've never seen someone so technically gifted with such a poor first touch. And that's one of the reasons why he couldn't play striker for me. Because in the Premier League, you've got to work in the smallest of spaces to succeed as a forward. You've got to take the ball into feet, you've got to turn, you've got to strike it. And whilst Pépé has done that on occasion, as we saw in the Wolves game, for instance, and the goal he scored there, his touch just isn't enough. His instinct isn't enough. And despite having that great technical ability and the ability to beat a man, he can't beat more than a man most of the time. And I think that is a bit of a problem with him. But you can't just start putting square pegs in round holes when you've got such an important season coming up. And the confidence of Pépé is on the floor. Arteta is just not sold on him at all. But I can't fault the guy's attitude. You know, he came back from the African Cup of Nations. He fought for his place in the Middle Eastern training camp. You know, came off the bench in the Wolves game, scored, and despite not having the best of performances from the bench sometimes, the game against Aston Villa obviously sticks in my mind. The game against Leeds, I think, where obviously he was, you know, on the halfway line with open goal, he cuts back, that meme that went around. You know, I think there's a player there, but just not for Arsenal, and it's just for somewhere else. But yeah, he's gonna move on. He changed agents this summer with the aim of moving on. So I think it will be later on in the window, because I just think his wages are too much of a problem, and someone eventually will pounce. And Arsenal again may end up paying a portion of those wages to get him off the books.
Yeah, or the player might have to concede somewhere along the line in order to make that happen. You never know.
Mm.
What do you make of this? You know, there is some concern among Arsenal fans, and I know some of the talk that's been doing the rounds in recent days has kind of dismissed a little bit of that. But what do you make of people that are concerned, or what do you make of the opinion that Arsenal are not quite executing some of these deals because they're trying to sell first? I'm not sure that that's the case. I feel like Arsenal have shown in the last couple of windows that they're accepting of the fact that past mistakes are past mistakes, and they need to invest in order to get back to where they want to be. What do you make of that? Because there is still a bit of that floating around on sort of social media.
Yeah, I don't think it's a long answer. It's just Arsenal will sell when they sell, but they are putting into place their plan to buy players as soon as they feasibly can, if they agree that the target is the right one. And if you look at our players that we're going to sell this summer, they are prime end of window sales. They are not early deal done kind of sales. They are opportunities for clubs to get cheaper deals at the end of a window. That's what they are. When Arsenal are more desperate to get them off the books, and clubs know that they'd have to pay more now, they'll know that they'd just be happy to wait. Especially European clubs, where the pressure isn't the same as on the Premier League teams at the start of a season. You know, they will be happy to wait, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go over to the chat again. A very, very kind super chat donation from the Gunner Down Under. Thank you so much. He says Eddie's business is strictly. What's that, mate?
It's just a new barbecue, that is.
Yeah, well, it's probably one round of meat for me.
True.
He says Eddie's business is strictly an investment one. Lose him now for free or re-sign him on $5 million a year, or break square minimum in a year or two if it doesn't work out. We did the same with Saka and Martinelli. Gave them huge spells right before contract renewals. I'm guessing he means we gave them sort of runs in the side and sort of really put faith in them. It does feel like the Nketiah thing is partly being done because of that as well, right? The protection of the investment is something that Arsenal have been so bad at in recent seasons. You can't rule out the possibility that 12 months down the line, Arsenal say, this isn't working. Eddie says this isn't working, and we do end up selling him, and we'd have lost him for free. So it isn't the worst thing in the world, is it?
No, and I also think that the idea of Arsenal signing 2 strikers this summer was unrealistic. If we're going for a wide forward as well, you know, Raphinha, Gabriel Jesus, it's going to cost you about 100 million. And then you've still got to bring in the midfielder that we want. We clearly wanted an attacking midfielder with Fabio Vieira that's cost us £34 million. The defender that we want in a Martinez style, versatile defender. Turner's cost us money. Marquinhos has cost us money. And then you've got all the expenditure of everybody else that is already at the club in terms of wages and others that we may end up having to pay off as well. And we've still got installments for other players like Pépé to still pay off this summer. So, the idea that we would then go out and spend another 30, 40, 50 million on a striker was not realistic. So if you can get a striker that has Premier League experience, that's got 5 goals in the last 8 starts, sign on to a new deal on 5 years, and then you can still bring in Gabriel Jesus and Rafinha, which of course are still ifs. We don't know if that's happening, but if we can do that, then you're going to look back at the end of the window and go, it does make sense, because it just wasn't feasible or realistic to think Arsenal could go out and spend an extra 30, 40, 50 million on another striker. And as Arteta's son in the chat says, it is assuming that we get them. And this is the thing with these questions now, obviously, is we can only speak hypothetically, And sometimes I think, what will happen, especially with us, Harry, sometimes, and others that speak like-mindedly, is that things that we say hypothetically now can get picked up in 2 months' time as going, but you said this. The thing is that we can only speak hypothetically about this stuff right now. And I hope that we get Jesus and Rafinha done, because I think they'd be 2 excellent additions to the squad. If we don't, then trust me, you'll see us, or at least I can speak for myself, you'll see me you know, throwing out some criticism that we didn't get the deals done that we needed to. But I think that's important to add.
For sure. A big thank you to the Gunner down under. Thank you so much, mate. Next barbecue is on you. Really, really do appreciate it. John Bayliss says, and I'm going to put you on the spot here, Tom. What is it that you know about the Youri Tielemans bid that you aren't telling us? I've had people in my chat box the last few days telling me to turn up at your door and shake it out of you.
Really?
What is going on with Youri Tielemans? Okay, look, we don't know, but what do you believe is the snag here? Because it clearly is some sort of issue.
Yeah, like so it's there's no harm in me repeating stuff I said on my show. Like as I've said before, like and you'll know this because you know you get told things now and again. Although I did like your exclusive yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday about, you know, we will sign players before the end of the window. I thought that was a great exclusive, to be fair. Make sure you're following Harry on Twitter.
Arsenal will make an announcement before the end of the window.
Yeah, absolutely. Which came true. It came true yesterday, so you were right. You got to applause that.
I was only a day out as well.
Exactly. But yeah, no, as I said, like, you know, you receive information here and then. When you're in a place where sometimes information comes through, like, you have to respect the person that has given you that info. You know, you can't share it all because they trust you with that info, and they trust, and you have discussions about what you can and cannot talk about and stuff. But what I try to do is I try to be fair to the listeners whenever I talk about that stuff, is to throw out questions to the chat box and be like, question why this is happening. And so for the Tielemans situation, I said, question why the fact that, you know, personal terms are not a problem with Tielemans. You know, he wants to come to Arsenal. Arsenal are happy to pay what his demands are. It's not an issue. Personal terms aren't a problem at all. But we've not bid for him. And we have, you know, we never put a bid in to Leicester. Leicester have never received an official offer from Arsenal. So you have to question, why wouldn't we do that? You know, we're putting a bid in for Raphinha. So that should, and I think Clive put the tweet out yesterday, which I absolutely agree with, is we would not be bidding for Rafinha if he was not open to the idea of coming to Arsenal. Yeah, Arsenal were never going to bid for a player that they think that, you know, that the player isn't. So with the whole Vlahovic situation, you know, we were never putting an official offer into Fiorentina because we couldn't agree. We couldn't get to the player to agree a deal with him. So because we've now put officially a bid in for Rafinha, you know, personal terms for him aren't going to be an issue. We wouldn't be going in for a player that we know we get a bid accepted and then the player turns us down. It's just not going to happen. So you have, that's what I would say to people, is just question why we haven't bid despite personal terms not being a problem. Does that, I hope that, you know, I'm trying to be as fair as I can, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and say I think that there is an issue with the people involved in the deal, as opposed to one with Leicester or one with Arsenal, or one with Youri Tielemans. I think that in these deals there are a number of parties involved, and sometimes that can be a problem. And I guess that there is something along those lines that is causing this to stall, and has caused Arsenal to go, well, look, we're not completely shutting the door on this, but we've got other things to be getting on with, and we're not going to be consumed in a deal that might not even happen. So yeah, you know, we're gonna have to wait and see how that plays out, and it goes back to what I always say, which is these things are a hell of a lot more complicated than people sort of care to admit. Look, just a quick reminder, guys, I know I've said it already, but please do hit that like button, because we're closing in on 1,000 live viewers at the moment, and we're nowhere near it on the likes. We're only on 231. Let's get that up to 500. Come on, it really does help.
Just to address that, I saw a comment from Deep Singh who said, we haven't bid because it's a smoke screen. Forget Tielemans and Rafinha. Like, it's not a smoke screen. You know, the priority central midfield signing was Tielemans. Tielemans was, Arteta has liked Tielemans for a long time. You know, when I was speaking to a friend of mine, Ben Jacobs at CBS Sports, you know, he jumped onto TGT and before anyone reported it, broke the news that Arteta wanted Tielemans, you know, and then that story has fed through and it's developed throughout the season. And, you know, they've had discussions for ages. Arsenal have wanted Tielemans for ages. It's just not working out right now. The deal's not working out. Rafinha, you know, we bid. It's not a smoke screen. You know, terms are no issue. We've bid. That's a deal that Arsenal want to get done quickly. I don't think they will. I think it'll be one that drags. But you know, I'm wrong, and we can sort something out. But I think he's going to wait to see what else happens with Barca. If they sell Frenkie de Jong, then they get a little bit of money in, and then who knows? So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and it's almost like as well, people have kind of been conditioned by the way Football Manager works into thinking that that's how transfers work. So in an ideal world, the classy way to go about a transfer is to approach the club first, make your offer, come to an agreement with the club, and then move on to agreeing personal terms with the player, and then hopefully completing that transfer. But we all know that it doesn't work like that anymore. We all know that clubs don't even want to sort of print the paper, type the email, whatever, to send that offer unless they have an idea that that player is interested, and they'll do that indirectly. They'll go through intermediaries. That's why football's become such an almost deep sea of mess when it comes to kind of these transfers, and why it can be so complicated. So I agree with you. I don't think that the Raphinha bid would have been made if he had turned around and said, I only want to go to Chelsea or Barcelona and I prefer Spurs over Arsenal. Arsenal wouldn't be wasting their time. You know, they clearly feel that this can get done. And obviously with Youri Tielemans, I agree with you. I don't think it was a smokescreen. I think that he's a player that Arsenal are interested in, but he's not somebody that they look at and go, well, we're going to be essentially bent over to make this deal happen. No, you know, we're not going to have our pants pulled down here. We're going to make sure that we get it in what we believe to be fair terms. So that's really, really important as well.
And like, if you think back to January, the Vlahovic thing, like at no point did you see like a credible source come out and say Arsenal have made an official offer to Fiorentina. And it didn't happen because they didn't get the go-ahead from Vlahovic that he would join. It was the whole January was all about trying to convince Vlahovic to come to us. So when he came out with those comments that was like, I didn't know about, I'm sorry, but that's a load of BS. That's just so much BS because he clearly did. And I don't even know why you would come out with that. But yeah, it's an interesting one.
Yeah, for sure. Another super chat from the Gunner Down Under. Thank you so much. He says, hey, boys, would appreciate maybe a collab soon. Been chatting with Mr. Judges to link up with us Aussies on a stream. Just starting up myself. Enjoy the barbecue. It would be a pleasure, mate. We'd love to come along and put Mr. Judges in his place, wouldn't we, Tom?
Absolutely. The flip-flop man himself.
Love you really, Judges. But yeah, no, for sure, mate. Let us know. It'd be nice to do something like that for sure. Let me just take a couple more before we wrap things up. Robin Rock has mentioned Pedro Neto from Wolves. He says he believes he'd be a great addition to the project. Now, I quite like Pedro Neto, but this is one of those situations, Tom, where if we ended up with Pedro Neto now that we've been so heavily linked with Rafinha, people would probably be a little bit underwhelmed. What's your take on the player and how that fits into the project?
Yeah, and obviously last season he missed so much of it because he was injured and he only got the 1 goal and the 1 assist. I'm just looking at his numbers now. But the season prior to that, he was so highly rated. He was being linked, I think, with Man United. And when he was 21 years of age, was scoring 5 goals, 6 assists in the Premier League, playing for Wolves. You know, he was getting into the Portuguese national sides. So yeah, look, he's a talented kid. I would worry about the injury. You know, I think that's a big worry at how that's affected him. Will he come back the same kind of player as he was before? Some players do, some don't. So if it was a case of going from Raphinha to Neto, I think that there would be legit concern about it going from that to that, but more so because of the injury worries, not because of the questions over his quality. If you're questioning Neto's quality, I can't. There's no argument because he's clearly got quality. It's just that worry about the injury recovery.
There are some people in the chat saying, and I'm just trying to see if I can find anything on this, that Dembele of Barcelona is on the verge of renewing his contract.
Yeah, there has been some whispers about that. Yeah.
Does that
that
rules Barca out of Raphinha, surely?
Surely, yeah, absolutely. If Dembele renews, I was watching something yesterday on the Spanish side of things, and they were saying he's on the verge. I don't know if it came. I don't know if it spawns from that. And with respect, this is the AFTV of old, but that like old AFTV Spanish TV show that what's it called? El
Chiringuito. What a show. What a show.
Like that, yeah, like that. Just the drama of it. You know what I mean? I think there was a story that came out of that. So I don't know how realistic that is because they were obviously really on for Mbappe to Real Madrid and that never happened. So who knows? Who knows? But yeah, surely he's staying. If surely Rafinha is not going Barca if Dembele because they can't afford it. Do you know? I love the Wengerisms about, you know, the Arteta's Wengerism of getting rid of Aubameyang to Barca so they can't afford to go to Raphinha. That's I love that. That's great.
You just get that meme of Arsene Wenger like this.
Yeah, and he's superimposed Arteta's face onto him. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Fantastic stuff. Look, guys, we're going to leave it there. We've been going for 45 minutes. A big thank you to everybody who's come along and joined us in the live chat box. There's so many of you with us, over 1,000 with us live right now. We got 300 likes on the board. Come on, let's get it up to 500 ASAP, whether you're watching live, whether you're listening back to this a little bit later on. If you're listening on the audio platforms, please do leave us a review, particularly on Apple Podcasts, and make sure you get over to Tom's channel. Tom, tell people when you're next doing a show, mate, so people can jump on.
Yeah, we're doing a show this evening around 6 o'clock. It's our tier lists series on a Wednesday. I say on a Wednesday. You can only do so many of them with the amount of positions we're after. But today's the wide forwards tier list. So where we go through where would everybody in the chat box rank Rafinha? Where they put him at the top of their tiers of like, yeah, absolutely go get him now, or they put him in the I'd steer clear of Rafinha. So it's a really engaging show with the chat box. If you'd like to get involved, then do. If not, you can see me every morning at 8 a.m. rounding up all the latest Arsenal news.
Fantastic. Make sure you give Tom a follow. Make sure you subscribe to the Gooner Talk, and we'll be back very, very soon with more Arsenal content. Until next time, take care of yourselves and enjoy the sunshine. All the best.
I'm Martin Tyler, and you're listening to Harry Symeou.